Hey, how would you like to pay zero taxes, not less taxes, zero taxes as an American, even if you make a six-figure income? You can. It's called the Foreign Earned Income Exclusion, or FEIE. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how it works. I have talked about this before. I'm going to get much more detail, and I have some really cool updates about this in terms of new tax laws. And there are some gotchas to this that I wasn't aware of now that I've taken advantage of this myself over the past 2 years. So I will go through this in detail. I have my notes in front of me here. First of all, the Foreign Earned Income Exclusion basically means that if you spend the majority of the year outside the United States, and to pause for a moment, this video unfortunately is just for Americans. If you are not an American, you should rejoice and throw a big party and be very happy that you can just move out of your country and stop paying taxes. In other words, your government, if you're not an American, treats you like a logical, normal, rational human being instead of like a goddamn slave like the United States does. So the United States is the only country in the world, besides Eritrea, which nobody cares about, where you move out of the country, but you still have to pay taxes back to the United States. You still have to file a tax return, and if you don't, you go to prison. Isn't that nice? I'm sure so glad America, what a great country America is. I should have stayed there. Anyway, so this video is only for Americans who are slaves. So if you're a slave American, I have some decently good news for you. The Foreign Earned Income Exclusion works like this. If you spend most of the year, most of the calendar year outside of the United States, the first 108,000, actually it's much more than that now, is actually tax-free. The first 100 and blank you make is completely tax-free. Not deductible, not like you get more deductions. It's tax-free. You pay no taxes. So if you make less than 100,000 or a little over 100,000, you actually pay zero taxes. It's awesome. So if you combine that using a 5 flag strategy, if you combine that with a zero tax country like here in Dubai where I live, or a territorial tax country like in Paraguay, my second home, where they only tax income coming from outside the country, you then pay literally zero tax, even as an American, without having to renounce your citizenship or anything else like that. You do still have to file a tax return because you're a slave. Okay, Americans are slaves, but at least you don't have to pay any taxes. Now, got some good news and I got some bad news. The bad news I'll get to a little later, okay? And you should know it because this threw me for a loop and blindsided me. I didn't realize this until I discovered it just somewhat recently when I did my own taxes. But here's some good news, and I'm shocked that there's good news. The Foreign Earned Income Exclusion back in 2020, I'm looking at my numbers, was $107,000. So if you made up to $107,000 under FEIE, and you follow the correct rules, which I'll discuss in a second, your first $107,000 is tax-free. In 2021, they raised it by $1,000 to $108,000. Okay, that's cool. In 2022, they raised it from $108,000 to $112,000, which is generally the number I've been quoting. $112,000. Okay, not bad. However, this year, 2023, guess what's happened? They have raised it now to $120,000. Now, this is really good if you make more than this. I make many multiples of that. So if you make more than this, your first $120,000 now for 2023 is tax-free, and then you pay taxes on the remainder of that, but there are other techniques you could use to reduce that. Outside the scope of this video, contact us and join one of our coaching programs so we can show you what we do. But, so now it is $120,000. This is awesome. Now, I'm sure there's some kind of horrible, corrupt, deep state reason why they keep jacking this number up, and the rate at which they raise this number is rising. My guess is that this is tied to some sort of inflation index. Great. As usual here at Sovereign CEO, we exploit the collapsing West and instead of trying to bitch about the collapsing West or try to stop the collapsing West by trying to elect people like Trump so he won't do anything again the second time. You want to exploit the collapse. So, hey, if that's what inflation is doing to my taxes as an American, won't be American much longer, but okay, fine. Give me more inflation. We don't have inflation here in Dubai outside of real estate. I don't care about that. So fine, crank that inflation and give me more money. This is great. All right, now let me explain to you how Foreign Earned Income Exclusion works. There are two different ways. And most people on the internet talking about this topic only are aware of one way. There's actually two ways. The first way, it's very simple. You just stay out of the United States and you're only in the United States for a maximum of 35 days per calendar year. That is calendar year. So that means Jan 1st to December 31st. If you have Jan 1st to December 31st, and you're outside the United States for the vast majority of the time, you can come back to the United States for a max of 35 days a year. That means you slept in the United States 35 nights. That's generally how that works. 35 days or less, then you now qualify. Your first $120,000 is tax-free. Sort of. I'll cover that in a second. So that's the first test. Now you might say, well, I want to spend more time than 35 days a year. After I give you the bad news, you won't want to do that, but I will explain how this works. The second way is a little better. The second way, which is what I do, is called the bona fide residence test. And under this test, they call it a test, you can spend up to 120 days per year, kind of, I'll explain that in a second, provided you show legally that you are a bona fide resident of another country. What does that mean? It means several things. Number one, well, it means basically if you were ever audited, you could prove to the IRS, hey man, I live here. I don't live in the United States. I live here in Colombia. I live here in Paraguay. I live here in Malaysia. I live here in Panama. I live here in Dubai. And you can show proof. Well, what's proof? Things such as you have a year-round lease of some kind of real estate in your personal name. Year-round lease, not an Airbnb, not a month-to-month, year-round. You can show that, okay? You can show you have bank accounts in that country, debit cards. You can show you spend it more than 6 months a year in that country. So clearly you live there if you spend most of the year there, right? You can show that you have things like a gym membership and you have friends there. And if you're married, your wife is there. If you have kids there. In other words, all this, you can show all this evidence that you clearly live in that country and not the United States. I do this in Dubai. Everything I just said, I have in Dubai plus more. So the IRS ever would audit me saying, prove to us you really live in Dubai. No problem. Here you go. And big mountain of evidence, I live here. It's so very obvious. So when you have that, now you can spend up to 120 days per year. However, you don't want to do just 120 days per year on 120 days. If you do 120, 120, 120 every year, you will get audited and you may have a problem. You want well under 120 days per year, and it should be a random amount. It shouldn't be 90 days a year or whatever. It should be 88 days one year and 100 days another year, and then 62 days another year, and then maybe 94 days another year. You make it random, well below 120 to avoid an audit because, again, you're an American. You are a slave. Remember this. You are a slave if you're an American. You Americans, unless you renounce your citizenship, that might be a good idea. Okay. So those are the two ways in which it works and which you qualify for it. Now, let me give you a little catch to the foreign earned income exclusion that I didn't even know myself until just a few months ago when I went to do my taxes again. This is now the second time that I have taken advantage of the foreign earned income exclusion. So the first, in my case, $112,000 of income I made last year was tax-free. Tax-free, baby. And I pay a lot less taxes on stuff above 120 or 112 because of other things I do, again, outside the scope of this video. However, there's a gotcha. There's always a catch, right? Here's how this works. So this year, 2020, let's use this example this year. I'm doing this year, of course. So 2023, I can I am tax-free on the first $120,000 I make in a calendar year for 2023. So I qualify for foreign earned income exclusion because I match one of those two tests, either the bona fide residence test or the 35-day test. That means you now qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion. It doesn't mean you get the entire exclusion. What do I mean by that? Well, what they then do is when you go do your taxes next year, they will ask you, what was the number of days you stayed in the United States? And you have to tell them the exact number of days. So whenever you do 5 flags, I do this myself, I have a spreadsheet that shows every city where I slept every day for the entire year. So I keep a very strict record, and it's a very accurate record of how many days I spent in each country for these kinds of auditing things. So at the end of the year, I can just press a button. I know exactly how many days I spent in the United States. Very simple. So let's say you spent 30 days in the United States, right? Now let's make it more interesting. Let's say you spent 90 days in the US, which I did the first time I did this, okay? What's going to happen is they're going to prorate that 90 days off your $120,000 deduction. So you're not going to get a $120,000 deduction. You're going to get 1/3 off that. Does that make sense? So in other words, For 2023, to use 2020 as the example for a 120K exemption, every day you spend in the United States when you qualify for FEIE, every day you spend in the United States costs you $328. So that means when you're doing something like me, you're doing a foreign earned income exclusion as an American, and you go back and visit your mommy or daddy or your girlfriend or whatever the hell you're doing, okay? Because you just miss America so much, okay? That means that every day you spend in that fucking collapsing country, you are pulling out $300 bills out of your wallet plus 28 bucks, 328, and handing it to your collapsed, corrupt, quasi-authoritarian socialist government every single day. Doesn't that motivate you to stay the fuck out of the collapsing USA as much as you can if you're living a Five Flags lifestyle? I did not know this. So I went, hey, how come I didn't get this full deduction? Well, you spent, whatever number it was. You spent 77 days in the United States last year. I'm like, fuck! So this year in 2023, I will be spending, unless something unusual happens, I will be spending less than a month, grand total, in the U.S. the entire calendar year. Thank the gods. Next year will be even less, hopefully. But even then, that means I have 30 days, or whatever I spend, times 328 days, or $328, off my $120,000 deduction. So I won't actually get the full $120,000. Maybe I'll get, $110,000. That's still good. It's fine. But 120 is a lot better, isn't it? So just be aware of this. Let me give you one more piece of good news. And when you do this, there is an additional deduction, which is a housing deduction. You can write off the cost of your housing, your foreign housing. That's a little complicated, and I'm not an accountant. I can't give you the data on this, but just be aware there are other little deductions you could kind of smack in there legally if you're living a lifestyle where you spend most of the year, or the vast majority of the year, outside of the collapsing USA. One more last thing. When you leave the collapsing USA, you still have to file a tax return. And there have been people who have gotten in big trouble who moved out of the United States, didn't know this, and for 10 years they were gone. They came back one day and they went right to jail or had all kinds of problems at the border because they had 10 years of back tax returns they didn't file. Why on earth would a government charge someone taxes if they never stepped foot in the country and never used the resources of that country? Ask your slave overlords, the Democrats, Republicans. You slave Americans. That's the way you wanted it. If you had voted for libertarians, you wouldn't have this problem, but today you do. So that's it. That's the foreign earned income exclusion. If that doesn't give you yet another reason to get the fuck out of the collapsing USA so you can save a massive amount of money on taxes, you can literally, if your income is around $100,000 or a little more, pay literally, I just said this earlier, zero tax. I have to pay some tax because I make more than that, but you can actually configure your stuff so you pay literally zero taxes as an American without having to renounce. Pretty cool. I'll see you soon.